Hey guys, I'm Matt Lighty. This is my Affliction starter build video. Just going to be going over basically the vibe, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, what's the direction, what's the dealio. So I was assigned Cleave Berserker, specifically in inspiration of the Cleave of Rage transfigured Cleave gem. There's a lot to unpack with this build. First and foremost, and I suggest you check out if you're going to be following this build or give a shit, the notes section, because I've added notes for different things, especially the important section. Cleave of Rage has something that some people do not understand if you didn't read it. Character swings both their weapons in an arc, damaging monsters in an area in front of them or a frontal cone. Requires dual wielding both an axe and a sword. You have to have an axe and a sword. Otherwise, you cannot play Cleave of Rage. Now, I won't have Cleave of Rage when the build starts, so I'll just start with whatever. And the second I swap to it, I'm going to be main-handing an axe and then off-handing a sword. That is the vibe. Now, because of that, we gained some stuff for using Cleave of Rage. Most notably, the 0.1 meter 2 radius per 3 rage, of which we get over 100 rage easily, almost always. So, huge chunk of AoE is the thought process. Now, the way it works for Val gems, I believe, is the same way it worked for alt quality gems, which is, if we have a Val Cleave acquired through Valing a Cleave of Rage, our main active skill will be Cleave of Rage, and our Val component will just be Val Cleave, this is how it worked for alt quality gems. So, assuming that's the same thing, that's what we'd be doing. Why would we give a shit? Well, because Val Cleave is actually pretty good in the fact that it gives us baby headhunter effect if we kill things. So, if we kill things with Val Cleave, we headhunter them. There's no reason not to just be periodically using it. It's kind of a cool thing. But I digress. So Cleave of Rage on a Berserker is really leaning into the rage motif. So, as a Berserker that has to use an axe and a sword, what do we want to do? What's the dealio? What are we embracing? A couple components. One, war cries are really, really good, especially exerting attacks, especially as a Berserker, which is a Marauder. Things like Warbringer grant us more attack damage if a Warcry sacrificed rage recently, which will be almost always because we're going to have a fuck ton of rage. So, huge chunk of damage there. Then you have rage scaling from things like Crave the Slaughter, which gives us rage. And then Rite of Ruin triples rage and also makes us stun immune. But we're going to be losing a bunch of life. And then that plus Aspect of Carnage means we're extra squishy. So, we do invest in the tree in a good chunk of certain defenses, things like having res, having immunities to certain effects, having iron reflexes, having fortify, having, again, war cries up, good life pool, good regen, good leech, all that things. But we still have to lean into the fact that we're going to be basically defensing through offensing. And we're picking up crit, we're picking up the important axe things, we're picking up the important warcry things, all the amazing warcry clusters that give us things like, frenzy, all charges, things like tons of multi, things like permanent onslaught, things like a ton of res and armor. So we got some stuff going on. Now, the equipment is where it gets a little wonky, but it's actually not too bad. So this is what I refer to as my starter equipment. And there's only one thing on here that's not starter-friendly, per se, in a solo self-hunt setting, and that's the Savior, being our sword and our axe and sword combo. This is an endgame thing. You do not need this. You could just use a rare. You can use a unique like Ons or a Skava or a Ichimonji, something like that. Everything else is obtainable, especially in the path in which we're going to navigate, again, which we'll go over in a second, but I have specific Atlas tree setups for the specific ways we're going to go about things. So, rare gear, rare, a bunch of rares, and then leaning into the new Psychotic Axe. Now, this one is 10 rage, the new one's 20 rage, more Cleave AoE, more tripled stats, Berserker, go Burr, things like that. Bear Belt, more rage, permacrush, more fizz scaling, more rage. You can see the theme here, rage, angry rage. And yeah, then Simplex Amulet was changed from 25% to 100%, and it now has -2 prefixes. So for that, we just toss an Essence of Multi. It ends up being an amulet that has 82 multi, and that's like basically it. It's like a Great Wolf. And then you have the Dawn Striders, which is like a 22% drop off of Exarch. Easy to obtain in SSF, great stats, great ability. Totems are OP for melee. It makes them as good as it can be. Fantastic, fantastic. So the gear is basically just res life, mitigation, and then you have your big fucking weapons. Not too exciting to be, going on there. But the skills are a little bit more exciting. Ancestral Protector plus Dawn Strider equals cracked attack speed. If you want to use War Chief and you don't want to use Val Cleave, use Val War Chief. That's fine too. Leap Slam for movement, clarity, vitality, purity of elements, and precision are auras. Precision's on arrogance. Just gives us our mana, gives us our little bit of regen we need to survive, gives us our crit, our accuracy, gives us our res and our ailment immunity. When we have ailment immunity from things like jewels eventually or gear, drop this, run Determination. When we have Elrion rings, on our rings, our simplex, we don't need mana anymore, drop this. You could run a higher level something else, or you could run, Blood and Sand, whatever you want, Flesh and Stone. You have some flexibility there. Casting damage taken set up, hooked up to Life Tap, also hooked up to Intimidating Cry. This is our War Cry. Intimidating Cry gives us a buttload of, not just to be intimidated, but also gives us a buttload of physical damage reduction, and it exerts attacks, which plus Berserker means we hit really fucking hard. Also, they deal double damage, which is really, really good. Now, good to note, since we're leap slamming, you have to pick up the War Cries cannot exert travel skills, meaning our leap slam will not be eating our precious doubled 50% more multiplied exerted attacks. We don't want that to be happening. We also have our Assassin's Mark on hit set up, totally automated, just feels great. We're playing a crit build, can't complain there. We also have our main Cleave setup, which is going to be, things like Multi-Strike, Brutality, Melee Fizz, Pulverized Rage. These gems might change, Awakened versions might change things. We're just going to kind of feel it out. I might want to hit much less often, but hit much harder, in which case I drop things like Multi, run things like Cruelty. Not exactly sure yet. It's kind of just like a feel it out type vibe, but you get the idea. I'm just going to be cleaving and doing a fuck ton of fizz damage, because why not? So you've seen the gear, and the road to acquire this is interesting, because you have things like Thread, which on a medium is really, really good for this build. You get to pick up a lot of super, super nice things like these axe nodes. It's a little bit awkward because we're, again, main hand axe, offhand sword. What do I want to spec into? Because, these things don't do the most. Well, I still get the rage from here. The intimidate, less important because I have intimidating cry, so I don't really need that. But, do I want to get sword stuff? Well, some of them are okay. This one's pretty good. It gives us accuracy, but it's only with swords. The Razor's Edge, though, the overwhelming 20% physical damage reduction, doesn't specify swords, so that is pretty nice. But yeah, they also have some clusters that give us a lot of benefits from physical damage over here. And getting clusters is a little bit annoying, but in Solus Alpha, and since they patched the last Keystone, it's actually pretty hot. We didn't talk yet about the Ascendancy for the Primalist, which is what we're going to be going. So Wildwood Primalist is our Affliction Ascendancy. Starting with Howl of the Wolf. Now, what does that do? That makes it so our War Cry is open chests, and again, we're War Crying fucking constantly, because we have Call to Arms, just put War Cry on left click. Its cooldown is not long, 8 seconds. So it's going to be pretty frequent. We'll be using the War Cry. We can get some CDR, but there's really not much to get for that. But yeah, pretty frequent War Crying. That also pops loot out of corpses, which is like a gimmick, but could be useful early on. That's why I wrote swap into Charm slot 3 after 3rd good Charm, because aside from Might of the Bear, which gives us a Herodric Cube mini inventory, we're just getting Charm slots 1, 2, and 3. Now the Charms are going to have mini Ascendancies as prefixes and suffixes. We don't know what they all are yet, but they could be things like Fortify, Rage Scaling, Fizz Damage, Overwhelm, Crit, maybe something with Charms. So once you get 3 good ones, you could drop the War Cry meme, run your 3rd Charm. Shouldn't be an issue. Atlas Tree 1, let's go over that real quick, because that's used for getting our Bear Belt, our stockpiling juice for crafting, heisting for a Psychotic Axe, and then maybe a Simplex. So Tree 1 is going to be this. this is what I'll transition into after setting up my basic Atlas stuff. This again is utilizing crop rotation, which is great in conjunction with the rest of the harvest tree to get the bear belt. You just make sure the purple is the last plant you click. Gives you the best chance possible at getting a T4 boss, especially in conjunction with Heart of the Grove. And the 10% chance to not wilt means, you could hit like a blue, then a yellow, and you could double buff up your purples and hopefully get multiple bosses. And then heist things, again, you're heisting because we want to get our Psychotic Axe, which we want to craft. We need that Psychotic Axe. ID3 is what we want to get to roll Fizz rolls on it. Also, Simplex, if we can get it, we can get it. If not, we can't. We're going to keep on Destructive Play for a large chunk of time. Hopefully get some Awakened Gems and maps, and then just Harbinger. And, things like Harbinger, things like Strongbox are just good for just base currency generation. So after we finish our heist grind, finish our bear belt, we move on to the second tree, which is going to be used for Delirium, Essence, and Cirrus. So Unending Nightmare is used to get our mediums and our large. We need 2 Exert 4/5 passive mediums and a 1 8 passive Fizz. It's a little annoying, but that's fine. You could also get an 8 passive attack. It's not the end of the world. I'll write Fizz/attack because that also, it's not no fucking difference. But yeah, so Unending Hunger lets you spam Delirium maps for any amount of charms from that. This means the fog doesn't dissipate. You can't get orbs or splinters. They don't matter. You're just there for your clusters. Then you get out of there. After that, you get a bunch of essences for axe crafting. So at this point of the plan, we already have our Psychotic Axe. We have our Simplex, right? We're just looking to craft them. If you don't get your Simplex, but you get your Psychotic Axe, and you finish up your belt and you have your axe, move on. Simplex is probably going to be pretty rare. Wouldn't go crazy for it. But Psychotic Axe ID3 shouldn't be too hard. Fingers crossed. They kind of fucked heist now, so we're hoping it's not the case. But yeah, stockpiling essence for crafting, getting your harvest stuff finishing, or getting your delirium stuff finishing out your cluster jewels, and then start stockpiling Cirrus attempts because we're gonna need a bunch of Cirruses to hit our thread, and fucking cock and balls crossed. We hit a savior. That would be insane. Savior gives us reflections, which copy your abilities when you crit. Should give us a huge chunk of clear on top of regular clear. Well, I don't know how they interact with rage, if they have your amount of rage or they don't. Either way, just 2 more boys running around cleaving ain't half bad. So that's the gist of this tree. That's basically the last tree we'd be at. After that, we could swap back to a traditional tree for, whatever gear we're missing. If it's essence for crafting or if it's heist for getting our simplex, we could flip-flop back and forth to figure out what we want to do. Mana problems I note here is pretty easily resolved. Again, if you are having any sort of mana issues, what I recommend doing is getting the non-channeling craft on both your rings. If you end up hitting a simplex, you can put it on there. It doubles the value. You'll have literally 0 mana cost for everything. If you have both these, and then you pick up the life mastery, I'm not sure, here it is. The skills cost life instead of 30% mana. This makes it on a 6-link, so your cleave cost 2, which 2 should not be an issue with any amount of mana regen. If you end up putting on a simplex, you'll have like negative mana cost, so not a problem at all there. Yeah, that should be super, super easy. But again, if you're really having problems getting your craft for some reason, does not hurt to just slap on intelligence gathering when blowing through maps. It's the fastest way to reach Elrion consistently in solo self-found, to basically just get your craft if need be. If you're in trade, just buy it, you fucking filthy animal. If you're also blasting maps with that, I would also recommend just putting on Sulfite Infusion. It's kind of in the similar path, and it's something you'd want to do when blowing through maps because it'll get you a ton of free Sulfite, which you might want to grind out like an All's Amulet, or use fossils for crafting your axe instead of essences. If you feel like it, it's a preference thing. Not going to make you do it. Speaking of grinding, I just tossed in loosely here something you can put in your filter. I'm not sure what kind of filters you people use, but you can put this in your filter. This basically just shows any Siege Axe, Val Hatchet, Runic Hatchet, which are like the best 3 one-hand axes. And then same for swords, Jeweled Foil, Eternal Sword, Corsair Sword. This will just let you, give you a basic playthrough of like, I identify drops, I ID it, I don't, it's not good, I put it back in the ground. It's like not terrible, just to start mowing your way through one-hand swords and SSF and axes just to like shoot your shot. The odds of you IDing something remotely good is not high. It's the equivalent of like you tossing one chaos on, you know, a Siege Axe. But you'd be surprised after a couple hundred maps, 1,000 maps. So sometimes you just ID a 3T1. You know, I'm not saying you're going to find something like this, the dream weapon, but it has to happen to somebody. Normal flasks, if you're in trade, you know, feel free to ball out, get a Progenesis, get a Oriath, you know, get a fucking Bottled Faith, have fun. Don't need them. Quicksilver, Granite, Basalt, a couple Life Flasks. Basically good to go. This is like a bread and butter build when it comes to that sort of stuff. You should be all right to keep flasks running because you're probably going to be hemorrhaging 10% life a second, something like that, at max rage. Granted, you have an amount of leech, you have an amount of regen. You should be, for the most part, okay. You have it like on kill effects and stuff, but yeah, just be safe out there. It's a cruel world after all. That's about it. That's my basic plan for Cleave of Rage. If you're asking the big question, Lighty, how the hell do I acquire my Cleave of Rage? What I'm going to be doing is pretty simple. I'm going to get to Act 3 or 4 whenever I unlock my Howl of the Wolf. If this happens before lab, I'm going to get this, then go to lab. If this happens after lab, I'm going to get this, then go back to lab. And I'm going to sit at normal lab until I have my Cleave of Rage, or I'm some atrociously high level, simply overstated how easy these trans gems are to acquire. I'm not sure which one's which. We're going to find out day one. But that's that. I hope you enjoy whatever build you choose to play. I'll be cleaving angrily with upwards of 150 rage with an axe in one hand and a sword in the offhand, and hopefully it's a savior. And this build will be my savior. And I'll have a bear belt, and I'll have all my cool things. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'm Matt Lighty. This has been Cleave Rage Berserker. My basic plan, and there's a lot of modularity to this again. Depends what you drop, depends what happens. But the only constants really are you're using Cleave, you have Rage, you're a Berserker, you gotta use an axe, you gotta use a sword. The rest is up to you. That's that. I've been Matt Lighty. Have a good day. Good luck on Affliction. And I'll see you guys at League launch. Bye-bye.